This is a production of Cornell University.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And it sounds like I am between this group and a break, and would certainly like to thank the opportunity for Cornell to having Bayer as well as myself join your presentation today. My name is Mark Foster, and I'm with Bayer Crop Science and our SeedGrowth business. Been with Bayer for roughly 22 years in both the Canadian and U.S. businesses, as well as across both the row crop business and our veg organization. And as introduced, I'm going to talk a little about how Bayer Crop Science positions themselves when we're thinking about seed treatments and the various components that go into our thought process about bringing products to market. So first and foremost, who is Bayer? Well, of course, we're a multinational company with a focus on seed, trait, chemistry, and biologicals. And really, when you start to think about the seed growth perspective, of course, we really encompass all of these things that we're talking about on this screen. We have wholly owned seed brands.
Mark, I'm not seeing you share your screen.
Okay, hopefully you're seeing it now.
Perfect.
Got it.
Perfect.
There.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. So as Bayer, we do focus through the components of our go-to-market strategy, inclusive of seed, traits, chemistry, and biologicals, and target them for both an upstream use pattern as well as a downstream use pattern. When we're focusing on any type of innovation, really the vision is driven by ensuring that that the products that we're searching for offer value to our customers, that they can be utilized in sustainable means, and then also have an ability for utilization as we look at more data-driven decisions. So when we're thinking about seed growth, there's a lot of things that go into this type of innovation and investment. Clearly, number one, in order for a customer to want to do business with any type of company, is to provide innovation and uniqueness within their operation. The next part is, of course, utilizing some technologies and formulations that can be broadly adapted for many different types of use patterns. As you all know, there's many different types of treating systems out there with varying degrees of sophistication, and the ability to apply them correctly is going to require some adaptable formulations that can make them work in varying circumstances. That leads us to application technology. We have a wholly owned division within Bayer that builds treater application technology and seed treaters based in Shakopee, Minnesota. I'll talk about here throughout the presentation. And then lastly, from a customer service perspective, it's definitely critical that you're able to service the products that you bring to market, and making sure that the customer experience is a positive one. And from our standpoint, the customer is not only the person selling the seed treatment that we sell the seed treatment to, whether that be a seed company or distributor, but also through to the person who's actually doing the application, and then ultimately to the farmer who is seeing success with utilizing the product from an efficacious perspective. Now, lastly, when we're thinking about the marketplace, as mentioned, we are a provider of seed within the global marketplace, and one of our largest customers at Bayer Crop Science is our wholly owned brands. This gives us a great opportunity to test run the formulations that we need to make sure that they can be applied correctly, and in addition to, it gives us an opportunity to make sure that customers are able to see a pathway to utilize the product. Not only though are we a seed company, we are a chemistry provider. The seed growth space is a very small world where there's to date a finite number of active ingredients, and we also want to make sure that there's an opportunity to work with other providers out there. As mentioned, we're an equipment manufacturer, and ultimately the success of our products rely on application being successful as well. And the investment that we have in creating application technology that's sustainable and efficient is important. And then lastly, making sure that we have end use confidence. Now, Just to maybe focus on what is an example of success and why these things get a little bit more complicated. In this top right-hand corner, you see some of the things that we're really trying to do. As an example of a soybean seed treatment, we're really looking at roughly 8 to 9 different components in very small scale that we're applying to a seed in order to have the expression of efficacy to control varying degrees of pests or promote growth in the case of biologicals to be illustrated within a farmer's situation. When we start to talk about these 7, 8, or even up to 9 different types of products that we're putting on the seed, being able to do so on a finite amount of real estate within the seed is extremely important. With the development example through equipment, you can see a picture of a Bayer on-demand treater, which allows for varying components to be applied to specific seeds at a very a controlled rate and a very quantifiable rate. As you can see, a closed system that doesn't allow for significant exposure to the user and is ultimately a clean means of doing so, while relying on loss of weight measurements to ensure accuracy that the amount of seed treatment that is being applied to those particular components is being done in an accurate measure. So while we have many of those components and we have ways to apply them in an accurate means, we also have to make sure that when we do put it into the drum of the treater, that the treatment itself goes onto the seed and not become sticky within the bowl or within the drum. So success at the end of the day is really having that product that you're applying go from the chemistry jugs onto the seed and not being upheld by the metal surrounding the application means. The next step, of course, is then taking it from that treater and putting it through the planter. And in a means of testing, you want to make sure that all of those varying components still allow flowability. They don't bridge up within a planting system, which ultimately creates time and costly efforts on behalf of a farmer in order to get that planted seed into the field. And then lastly, of course, the proof is always in the results. And when we do get the seed into the field, we want to make sure that the products do control the pests that they perform and say that they will control and ultimately lead to a farmer being set up for a successful harvest. Now, from a 4-pillar type of approach, it really all starts with the formulations that you're working with. And as we're considering these things, we have full formulations inclusive of fungicides, insecticides, adding seed coatings and finishers, so things like Fluency Agent Advanced to ensure that we have flowability. As mentioned in the previous speaker, biologicals are also added to the formulation and into the actual application. And then ultimately making sure that the formulation is stable. We need to make sure that we can ship these products to the applicator and they'll be able to maintain their longevity and be able to manage some more adverse conditions such as higher heat temperatures or lower temperatures to avoid freezing and thawing, but ultimately maintaining their viability to make sure they can be used effectively. And lastly, another pathway to that is through custom blends, which is ultimately the layering of individual assets in fully formulated means, one on top of the other, and then can be mixed together for an application at point of time. When we're thinking about that application means, we do run all of these things through our labs and then at a pilot scale in our research facility, and then we move it on to a full-fledged scale treater at a pilot plant. Our labs are located in St. Louis, do this on a small scale to ensure proof of concept. And then in our pilot facilities, we have scaled down versions of full-size treaters to make sure that they do work in either a batch treatment or a continuous flow type of experience. Then the final step is to take it to commercial treaters. And as mentioned, we know that while we build seed treaters ourselves at Bayer, we want to make sure that they have functionality with the vast array of application technologies that do exist. And when we're doing all of these things, we're first and foremost considering seed safety. Putting these chemistries on the seed, it's important that they don't hurt the efficacy of the seed from a germination perspective. As mentioned by your previous speaker, we want to make sure that they the chemistries can work together and don't necessarily have antagonism when they're mixed together in a slurry. Formulating recipe creations in utilization of those coatings and finishers, and then ensuring that we have field testing that that has been accomplished to ensure that they work correctly. From an equipment perspective, this varies anywhere from what I've called inside the bag as well as some outside the bag type of opportunities. Commercial, of course, is when upstream companies or seed companies are applying the product for you. Generally, this is a means of professional application. And then the formulations also need to be able to work in an outside the bag or downstream mentalities, which is very common in soybeans and cereals. Ultimately, this equipment we want to make sure is accurate, can be applied in a safe means from a stewardship perspective, and then from a sustainability component that they're applied in a means that that put the seed treatment on the seed and that treatment stays there. And then lastly, a full service portfolio is important, whether that be from the development of the product in our field solutions organizations or technology development, all the way through to ensuring that the customer has a very satisfied product in the field. Now, just a couple more slides here that I wanted to go through as to a bit of the complexity on the formulation development. One of the things that we take for granted is ultimately we're trying to put as many solids as we possibly can into a liquid and make sure that they will still pump and then hold themselves to the seed once it's applied. As you can see within a formulation, the active ingredient portion is really about a quarter of it. And beyond that, you have several other components that make the formulation a viable product to be utilized, whether that be pigments or buffers, anti-foaming agents or dedusting agents. And really getting the mix of those products correct is really what's going to ultimately have the best utilization for your end user. The active ingredient, of course, you're working on making sure that it is going to control the pests or promote the growth that you're actively intending to do. From a disbursement, we're making sure that it will stay in the means of liquid that you want it to be staying in. And then ultimately from water and solvent and filler, that's to make sure that it will flow within the certain formulation that you've built, as well as then adding adjuvants and rheological aids to make sure that they do perform in means of suspension and application that you're searching to do. Ultimately, as mentioned, you can see the varying different types of things that you're attempting to do, and whether that be adding solids to liquids or oils, it's extremely difficult to do in a concentrated means that is still able to be utilized by our end customer through the application means. Now, after we've got that formulation built, I'd mentioned the next element is to make sure that we can apply these products in a way that is going to ensure that there is good stewardship as well as proper efficacy of the product ending up in the intended active ingredient load. Different types of means are done, but a couple of core measurements for us are ensuring that dust and dust off is well under control with the formulations, and if any tweaks would need to be done through dedusters or additions for that. And what you can see here from an application standpoint in the bottom left-hand corner is, particularly when you get to on-farm applications, not all seed quality is necessarily industrial grade, if you will. So you have to make sure your formulation is able to be optimized to work with varying degrees of seed quality going in. And as you can see, in the bottom corner, we've attempted to work with both highly cleaned conditioned seed and then some stuff that is maybe a little bit more, or I should say less refined. After you've put the product on the seed, we run it through some seed flowability testing. Ultimately, this is to ensure that it doesn't bridge when it's within its planting technology or going through the augers into the planter. This is definitely a pain point for consumers if they do experience any of that type of issue, and in particular in the planting situation. And what we know is that the viscosity can change of that seed after we have applied these products to them. So seed flowability is extremely important. And then the other thing I just talk about is the coverage. So ensuring that the there's enough liquid and application technology to ensure that we have ideal coverage to the entire seed, as some of these products are more of a contact rather than a systemic, and it's important to make sure that you have good coverage of every opportunity of that particular seed. Now, lastly, I just want to talk a bit about our equipment focus here. We've certainly seen tremendous innovation when it comes to equipment. Bayer has, of course, mentioned we have upstream type of application equipment through commercial plants, but there's also a need for downstream type of equipment. And clearly in the top left-hand corner, you see examples of probably a little bit more unorganized type of treatment location, and we could probably all agree that there's some things that we'd rather not see in that picture. Below that is the Bayer on demand, which controls the amount of chemistry being applied to the seed, but it's also a closed system opportunity where it's just really done through the pumping stands and loss and flow measurement of the chemistry being applied through the atomizer. This type of technology is all done in the Shakopee location, where there's a 135,000 square foot facility built to construct both upstream and downstream equipment of varying levels of control and scale. So we're very fortunate to have this investment to be able to utilize the top to bottom integration of creating a formulation, but also being able to apply it. The core elements of the equipment business is really from application uniformity, as well as utilizing the formulation to make sure it goes through the equipment. But our true areas of emphasis are on stewardship, user safety, and then value assurance that the product is going onto the seed correctly. And then lastly, from a regulatory compliance, it is very important that we use these products at the appropriate rates and be mindful that they do get to the seed correctly. So really, in summation, from a customer success standpoint, our goal here at Bayer is to have products that move from a plantability perspective, have user safety, have considered stewardship considerations, and then offer value to customers through efficacious approaches to insects and diseases, as well as offer means of applying varying biological components. So with that, I'm going to maybe hit pause and see if there's any questions.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.